Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Now my review of Elton John's 1995 album Made in England certainly provoked some controversy amongst my subscribers. I kind of put out a bit of a challenge to you to what you thought about these tracks and whether you agreed with me, and the general consensus of opinion seems to be that you don't agree with me. Well, fair enough, because I'm only offering my opinion about these tracks. I'm just giving high marks to the ones I like and low marks to the ones that I don't like. Now, a quick review of my marks in case you missed that video. I wasn't keen on the opener Believe, which I gave 3. I like Made in England, 6. I particularly dislike the track House, and I explained why on my video before, and I only gave that 1 mark out of 10, one of my lowest marks, I'm afraid. Cold, I thought was a good track, 5. Pain, an excellent track, 8. Belfast, a good track, 5. Latitude, okay, 4. Please, a very, very good track, 7. Man, I didn't like that at all, gave that 2. Lies, I thought was average, 4. And Blessed, a brilliant track, and I gave that 8 marks out of 10. Clearly, quite a few of you disagreed with my marks. So I'm going to give you a little selection from the comments here, nearly 40 comments posted on this one. So I'll just mention some of them on this video. Now, first things first, we were looking at the titles of these tracks and we were trying to decide what Elton's shortest song title is. Now, I said rather stupidly that it's probably one of the 4-letter titles like Lies, whereas in fact on this very CD there's a track called Man, which has got 3 letters. And some of you have come back with others, like Ego, for instance, has only 3 letters, and Amy from Honky Chateau has only 3 letters as well. We're not sure there's a 2-letter one, unless you know, but thanks to Adam Harris for pointing that one out. Now, Dirk, who's one of my regular contributors, was very unhappy with some of my grading. And he's saying that Latitude is among his favourite songs. He was giving that a really good mark. He likes the 6/8 time for it. He's never seen it as a country song, much more of a kind of folky song rather than that, and one that he can play on his ukulele. Well, fair enough. Also looking at some of the other songs there, he thinks when I do the one that's going to get a roasting. Not necessarily. I will be coming to that album soon. His top marks went to Believe with 8 out of 10. Fair enough. Cold, 7 out of 10. He likes Belfast, 8 out of 10. And Latitude, 9. And of course, Latitude did have George Martin involved in that. So it's got quite a good pedigree there. Please, he gives 8. Blessed, 8. So we're kind of in agreement on the best tracks there, but perhaps I've gone a little bit lower. He doesn't like House either, though, only gave that 1 out of 10. So thanks for your support on that one, Dirk. Now, Mahan, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly, is just explaining that line that I queried on the Lies track. Lie, lie, lie on a streetcar named Desire. Now, we know this was the Tennessee Williams play, but he says this refers to the actual plot where the main character started lying about her past and current life to her sister when she decided to stay at their place for a while. She's pretty much lying the whole time. So that's, I think, where that influence comes from. So many thanks for explaining that. A few people were saying about the cover, actually, and I was commenting that it doesn't have any writing on it, but apparently there was a slip cover to this. Now, somewhere along the line, mine has disappeared. Of course, there's a slip cover to Lockdown Sessions, isn't there? So I'm going to look after that carefully. But obviously mine has gone by the wayside somewhere. So that did have Elton John's name on, just to be clear. Now, 007 comments, such a shame that I gave such low ratings to such a brilliant album. Only to some of the songs. Some of the songs I gave very high marks to. He says it's 100 times better than the Lockdown Sessions. I wouldn't say 100 times. I'd say, they've both got some quality tracks on them. 007 says it's a mature album. It's inspired. One of his best works since the 1970s. Favourite tracks, 9 or 10 stars to Believe. Made in England, it's okay. Cold, Belfast, Latitude, and Blessed. So we're not too much disagreement on that, actually. He says the production is great. The orchestral arrangements are sometimes eerie, and I love that. I suppose on Belfast in particular, we get that classy orchestral arrangement that really does create a strange mood on there. So It turned out that this got the same marks as Leather Jackets, and I know there's a lot of people think it's much better than that. And I'd have thought it would be. I was a bit surprised when that mark came out. I suppose because Leather Jackets is saved by 3 or 4 good songs on there as well. Now, I got a bit of stick from Ellie, who's another regular, saying, "How could I criticise the track House? How can you do that to me? It's not the greatest song, but it's good. I would swap House and Blessed on your rating system." No way, I'm afraid. I gave 1 to House. Blessed I gave 8. I think Blessed is a mature, really classy song. Great vocal on there as well, and meaningful words. So don't quite agree on that, but obviously I respect your view as well. Other standout tracks are Belfast and Cold. I thought they were pretty good, but not quite as some of the others. And Ellie loved the piano and guitar at the end of Cold. And in fact chose it to be on the fantasy set list. I remember I've got another video in which I name my fantasy set list that I would like Elton to play as his final concert. I know quite a few of you joined in on that one. Davey Wavy finds the album enjoyable, but feels that often the instruments are drowning out Elton's voice. I had some issues with the mix of the production on some of this. It was a little bit too rich in places, and Davey wasn't keen on some of the orchestral arrangements, which might have been overdone. But would have increased the scores that I gave by at least 1 or 2. Well, fair enough. I'm just trying to be consistent with my other reviews, I suppose. Now, Daniel likes Elton's voice on this album. I do as well. In fact, it reminded me a lot of A Single Man, actually, Elton's voice on A Single Man. He sounds so young. It's his best album in the 90s and has some beautiful harmonies. Well, I haven't reviewed all of the albums in the 90s yet. Still got a couple to go, so we'll have to wait and see on that one. Daniel says, favourite tracks, Latitude, yeah, okay, Pain, good, Please, good, Believe, okay-ish. Reminds me heavily of the Electric Light Orchestra. Interesting, that one, isn't it? I've been considering doing some reviews of ELO albums. I don't know what you think about that. Let me know if you're at all interested. Right. Now, Rob Davis also says it's Elton's best album from the 1990s. And he wants to say that the album was heavily inspired by the Beatles. Well, we did notice that, especially on Please. It does sound like a Beatles song, doesn't it? And the fact that several tracks run together, yes, of course, that's Beatles influence, isn't it? George Martin's arrangement on Latitude, and the style of some of the lyrics and instrumentations. They all point to this, and of course the fact that it was recorded at George Martin's Air Studios. That is fair enough, I think. Good observation. Now, another thing that Rob says is I slightly misunderstood or misinterpreted the lyrics on Blessed, which I thought was kind of a parent sending a message almost to their newborn child. And he thinks that it's actually about a child that hasn't yet been born. And when I went back to the lyrics, I think that's pretty fair enough, isn't it? Which in fact makes the message even more beautiful. The fact that there's somebody thinking of the child that's yet to be born. It's a really good, classy song, that one. I think so. Rob agrees that House is the weakest track on the album, although it's a nice bridge between Made in England and Cold. Now, what do we think of that news this week with the influence of Adele, that Spotify are not going to let you shuffle up album tracks anymore, unless you kind of go to the bottom and play with it a little bit. But I think that's a pretty good move, actually. I always listen to albums in order, unless I've made my own playlist somewhere. But for instance, this album, I would definitely put on if it's on in the car, put on at the start. I don't like shuffling it. I want to hear the tracks in the way that Elton intended them. I might skip over the occasional one, but I would never shuffle them up. What do you think about that? David Sigler gives this the thumbs up, but he's not sure why. He puts this album in his Elton John top 10 of all time. Well, it came at about number 14 in my own chart that I've done. He says, a true return to form, and the production has been rescued from Chris Thomas's production. And he celebrates Paul Buckmaster's return as orchestral arranger. Thank you very much indeed. YS wrote in to say that this is Elton's revival. It started with Sleeping with the Past and continued with The One. Made in England is a symbol of a mature and classy sound. Well, it has got a consistent sound all the way through, you've got to say that. Belfast illustrates that fact perfectly, says YS. Well, it is a kind of powerful and majestic song. I just don't think it's quite as good as those other epics. You know, think of things like Ticking. I know I'm always mentioning that track, but that's just a fantastic sort of rolling story, beautifully presented, and something like Indian Sunset as well, I think. I don't think Belfast is as good as either of those, but you may have different opinions. YS says, I can't imagine the 90s without this album. It shows all music trends mixed with Elton's individuality. So favourites again, Belfast, Cold, Blessed and Made in England. Yeah, so good choices there, I think. And clearly a lot of enthusiasm for this one. Chris Booth says this is his favourite album. I don't know if it's his or hers. Sorry, Chris. My favourite album, not from the classic period. So I suppose from classic period we're talking about the 1970s. So a lot of people see this as their favourite. Chris loves the production, organic but energetic, and Believe is one of Chris's favourite Elton tracks. Well, fair enough, each to their own. I think it's okay. I just think it's not quite as good as some of the other tracks there. And Chris compares Latitude to a kind of Norwegian wood, one of the Beatles' eeriest, strangest, most interesting tracks, that one. So that's quite a tribute, actually, to compare it to something like that. Chris doesn't like the drum machine on the One album. We haven't looked at that one yet. And the big picture being a little bit too processed. Thank you for those comments. Interesting you should mention the Beatles. I'm toying with a Beatles series. I'm not sure about that. Should I go down that route? I'm certainly looking for other artists that I want to follow through right from the beginning up to the present. I'm doing ABBA at the moment, about halfway through. So I'm going to complete that series. But I'm going to start another one. I'm just looking for an artist that I know a little bit about, but not too much, so I can kind of see their music afresh right from the beginning. So if you've got any ideas on that, please send them in. Well, thanks for that. I hope I didn't offend anybody on that, but I'm just trying to be honest in getting a debate going about the music. Well, we've certainly achieved that, haven't we? By the way, there are some outtakes from Made in England album. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 9 songs that I've heard about. One of them, a couple of them we know, of course, Live Like Horses on the Big Picture, another version of Belfast, but then there's 7 other rather obscure songs that I've never heard about, which you may know something about. I've got to chase all of those up. They're called Building a Bird, Leaves, Hell, Skin, TikTok, Undone and Red. And those are the ones they recorded but didn't choose to put on the album. Now I've found a version of Building a Bird which I think is sung by Nigel Olsson, interestingly, but I haven't yet traced the others. Possibly they're on the Jewel Box, I don't know, but I'm going to try to get to those because we need to get all of those reviewed so they can go onto my spreadsheet. Anyway, next album coming up is going to be Ice on Fire. Now, I remember the day I bought that. I remember carrying it home, putting it on the stereo, listening to it for the first time. It was a cold winter's afternoon. I remember that. So I'm going to go back to that. I've only got the vinyl for this one and do a review of that next. So any thoughts early on with Ice on Fire, please send them in. That's it for now. Subscribe if you wish, and I'll be back soon. Don't forget, we're still standing.